The paper in Tara's hands was not shaking because it was light. It was shaking because she sat in a glass-walled conference room on the 4th floor of Lakeview General Hospital. The room had wide windows that let in cool white morning light and pale blue chairs arranged around a table that was too large for 3 people. None of the design choices were helping her right now. Across the table sat Gerald Park. He was a man in his late 40s with a dark green suit and a way of speaking that made everything he said sound like it had been weighed 3 times before it left his mouth. In front of him was a folder, a laptop, and a stack of papers with a blue letterhead she had not recognized until 20 minutes ago. Nathan Cole sat at the far end of the table. He had not spoken since Gerald finished reading from the report. He was watching her, not with coldness, with the careful attention of a person watching someone carry something very heavy and wanting to help but not knowing yet how to close the distance. The paper in Tara's hands was a DNA analysis report. She had agreed to the test 6 days ago. Gerald had explained it clearly and Nathan had asked her directly, looking her in the eyes, not pressing, just asking. He had said there was a reason and that he would explain everything once the results came back. She had said yes because something in the way he asked told her that the truth was already waiting and refusing it would not make it disappear. Now the truth was in her hands. Chloe was not hers. Not biologically. Not by blood. The child she had carried home from a cold service corridor 5 years ago. The child she had rocked through fevers and read to until they both fell asleep. The child she had enrolled in the best preschool her salary could stretch to and taken to every free clinic she could find. The child who called her mama, with the easy confidence of a girl who had never had reason to doubt it, was Nathan Cole's biological daughter. Tara read the numbers on the report again. The percentage.
The certainty of it.
She set the paper down and folded her hands over it, pressing gently, as if she could keep the words from rising off the page. Nobody spoke. Outside the glass walls, the hospital corridor moved the way it always did. Nurses in green scrubs walked fast. A janitor cart rolled past with a soft squeak. A child in a yellow gown was being pushed in a wheelchair by her father, who was smiling and pointing at something on the ceiling. Life going on. The ordinary morning of a place where people came to be healed. Tara thought about Chloe that morning. Chloe had worn a blue dress with white buttons and had eaten her toast in triangles because she had asked Tara to cut it that way. She had drawn a cat on a napkin before school and left it on the kitchen table as a gift for no particular reason. She had hugged Tara at the school gate and run in without looking back, the way confident children do when they know someone will still be there when they turn around. Tara had been that person for 5 years. She pressed her folded hands harder against the paper. Gerald spoke carefully. He said her name. He said the results did not erase anything she had built. He said Nathan was not there to take anything apart. He said they wanted to talk to her, not at her. Tara looked up at Nathan Cole. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands open, and he said, "I am not here to take her from you." His voice was quiet. It did not shake. Tara had heard a lot of things in her life that sounded like comfort, but were only words arranged to look like it. She had learned to tell the difference. She was not sure yet which kind this was, but she was still sitting in the chair. That was something. "Tell me," she said. "Tell me everything from the beginning." And he did. But to understand what Nathan Cole told her in that room, and why Tara Lewis was sitting there at all, you have to go back 5 years. Back to a cold February night, when a tired 24-year-old hospital cleaner finished her shift, pulled on her coat, and heard something she was not supposed to hear. A sound so small and fragile it almost did not exist, coming from the shadows near the service entrance. A sound that would change both their lives completely. If you are watching this and you have not subscribed yet, pause for a moment. Tara spent 5 years loving a child she found alone in the cold, with no help, no support, no idea what was coming. She gave everything she had. Before you scroll away, subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell us, would you have made the same choice Tara made that night? Because what happens next will shake you to your core. The hospital at 11:30 at night had a different sound to it than the hospital during the day. During the day, Lakeview General was full of voices, the steady motion of staff, the hiss of elevator doors, the announcements over the intercom that nobody seemed to actually listen to, but everyone instinctively registered. It ran at the speed of a place with too much to do and not enough hours to do it in. At night, the sound thinned. Corridors got quieter. The fluorescent lights in the staff areas stayed on at full brightness, but the rest of the building softened. Machines beeped at their steady rhythms. Nursing stations glowed with cool, white monitor light. The whole building breathed at a different pace. Tara Lewis had worked the night shift at Lakeview General for 2 years by the time that February arrived. She was 24, had a 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother Gloria on the east side of Lakeview, and had a talent for making a mop move efficiently across a tile floor that she had learned to be quietly proud of. She did not think of her work as less than anyone else's. She thought of it as necessary, and she did it with the same care she gave everything in her life. That night she had started at the East Wing and worked her way through to the service corridor near the loading dock by 11. She was in her blue hospital-issue uniform and thick-soled shoes that her feet had come to depend on after years of shifts. Her natural hair was pinned back under her cap. She moved through the corridor steadily, her cart beside her, the faint chemical smell of cleaning fluid mixing with the cold air that came in around the dock doors. She was almost done. 15 more minutes and she would be clocking out and walking to the bus stop. Then she heard it. It was so faint she thought at first it was the hinge on one of the dock doors, which sometimes made a thin, high sound when the wind was right. She stopped moving the mop. She waited. The sound came again. It was not a hinge. She left her cart and walked toward the corner where the service entrance met the exterior wall. There was a narrow alcove there, not much wider than a doorframe, where staff sometimes left boxes or bags while waiting for the dock to clear. A single overhead light, cool and white, lit it from above. In the alcove, tucked between a stack of flattened cardboard boxes and the wall, was a bundle wrapped in a thin white cloth that had gone gray from the cold. The bundle was moving. Tara crouched without thinking about it. She pulled the cloth aside. A baby. A girl. She could tell from the look of the infant's face. Pale from the cold, lips shading toward blue, but breathing. She was breathing. Her eyes were closed and her small hands were curled at her sides, and she was shivering so finely it looked like vibration more than movement. Tara's heart did something she had no word for. She picked the baby up immediately, cloth and all, and held her against her chest. She pulled her own jacket around the child. The baby made a sound, not a full cry, more like a protest from someone who had been waiting too long and was beginning to lose the energy for it. Her body was too light. That was the part that frightened Tara most. She turned and walked fast toward the interior doors, pushing through them with her shoulder, moving into the lit warmth of the building. She went directly to the nearest nursing station, where a nurse named Denise looked up from her screen and was on her feet before Tara had finished saying what she had found. What followed was an hour of nurses and a pediatric doctor and heat lamps and careful, professional work conducted with the specific urgency of people trained to do hard things quickly. Tara stood to the side after handing the baby over and watched from the doorway. She kept her eyes on the baby's face. The pediatrician, Dr. Okafor, came out to speak to her after the first assessment. He said the baby was dehydrated and cold, but stable. Newborn, perhaps 2 to 3 days old.
No serious injury. He would call it in as required.
A hospital administrator came to take Tara's account. Tara told her everything. The location.
The time.
The way the cloth had been folded. Whether she had seen anyone near the area. She had not. The dock had been quiet all night. She did not know how long the baby had been there. The police were called. A social worker arrived within the hour. The baby was placed in temporary hospital care, while the process of what came next began to be worked out. Tara went back to her cart and finished her shift. But she did not stop thinking about the baby. She checked in at the nursing station before she clocked out. The baby was sleeping. She was warm. She was going to be fine physically. The social worker had explained the process, the state system, the temporary foster placement, the waiting. Tara went home on the bus and sat in her coat and thought.
She thought about the alcove.
The thin cloth. The way the baby's lips had been going blue. She thought about how long a newborn could survive in that cold alone. She thought about what kind of person left a baby there, and then she stopped that line of thinking because it took her somewhere dark and she needed to think clearly. She thought about her apartment. 2 bedrooms. Her and Gloria. Gloria, who still worked 2 days a week at a community center nearby, and kept the kitchen organized and made rice and beans on Sunday evenings. Gloria, who had raised Tara alone after Tara's father passed, and had never once made Tara feel like a burden for existing. She thought about her salary. Enough for the rent and food and her mother's small monthly prescriptions, and very little beyond that. She thought about the baby's face when she had first pulled back the cloth. The fine, desperate shivering. The protest sound. The next evening, before her shift, she went to find the social worker. Her name was Ms. Bridget Haynes, a woman in her 40s with a careful, not unkind manner. She had seen many versions of difficult situations in her career. Tara sat across from her in a small office off the pediatric ward and explained what she wanted to do. She said she understood the process. She was prepared to go through it properly. She wanted to be considered as a foster placement for the baby. Ms. Haynes looked at her for a long moment. She mentioned the income threshold, the home study that would be required, the families already on waiting lists. Tara said she understood all of that. She still wanted to be considered. Ms. Haynes wrote something on her notepad and said she would start the paperwork. 3 weeks later, after a home study that went well in part because Gloria had cleaned every surface twice and set out a sweet potato pie on the kitchen counter as naturally as if she always had one sitting there, Tara was approved as a provisional foster placement. The baby came home on a Tuesday afternoon in early March. Tara had bought a second-hand crib from a church sale and set it up in her room. She had painted one wall of the room soft green with the last of her saved money and placed a small mobile above the crib, the kind with little paper birds in red and blue and yellow. She named the baby Chloe. There was no grand reason for that name. When she said it quietly in the apartment that first night, with the baby asleep in the crib and Gloria standing in the bedroom doorway in her lavender robe with her arms folded and her eyes soft, it felt right. It felt like it already belonged to the child. Gloria said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Chloe Lewis. That sounds like somebody who is going to be just fine." Tara looked at her daughter, because that was what Chloe already was inside her heart, and she said, "She is going to be more than fine." Neither of them had any idea what was coming. They only knew that the apartment felt different that night. Fuller, like something that had been quietly missing had found its way in through the door. Tara turned off the lamp and sat in the chair beside the crib and listened to Chloe breathe. She stayed there until morning. 5 years is a long time to learn someone. Tara had learned Chloe the way she had learned everything that mattered in her life, slowly, by paying close attention. She knew that Chloe woke up cheerful and needed about 6 minutes of quiet before she was ready to talk. She knew that Chloe could not stand the feel of seams in her socks, and that this was not a preference, but an actual discomfort, which had required 3 separate store trips to find socks with flat seams. She knew that Chloe loved to draw, not just color but actually draw, filling pages with figures and buildings and animals that had surprising detail for a 5-year-old. She knew that Chloe was deeply, quietly kind in the way of a child who had grown up in a home where kindness was not a performance, but a daily habit. Tara knew all of this the way a person knows the layout of a house they have lived in for years.
Not by thinking about it, just by being there.
The adoption had been finalized when Chloe was 2. It had taken patience and paperwork and a court date, and a judge who had looked at the full file, and at Tara, and at the social worker's report and had nodded and signed and said the words that made Chloe Lewis legally and completely Tara's daughter. Tara had worn a maroon blazer to the courthouse that day. Gloria had worn a blue dress. Afterward, they had taken Chloe out for ice cream, which Chloe had eaten with focused seriousness, as if it were a professional assignment. Now Chloe was 5 and in her first year at the community center preschool 2 blocks from Lakeview General. She walked in every morning like she was going somewhere she had chosen to be, which was the best kind of confidence. Tara's schedule had shifted over the years. She worked early mornings and mid-afternoons now, which let her drop Chloe at school and pick her up most days. On the days she could not, Gloria managed the walkover, 2 blocks at a slow, steady pace. Always there on time. The apartment had grown into itself. Chloe's drawings covered the refrigerator and one wall of the small hallway. A row of library books lived on the shelf above the television. Gloria's plants lined the kitchen windowsill in small clay pots, green and thriving in the cool light that came through the north-facing window every morning. It was a good life. Small, but genuinely good. The one part of Tara's life that did not feel good occupied the hours between 7 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon at Lakeview General. Patricia Holt had run the hospital's environmental services department for 11 years. She was a compact woman with short gray-streaked hair and a habit of standing with her arms slightly crossed even in ordinary conversation, as if she were perpetually mildly disapproving of whatever was in front of her. She had 12 staff reporting to her. She did not treat them all the same way. Tara had noticed early on that Patricia reserved a particular kind of attention for her. It was not the dramatic, obvious kind of mistreatment. It was the slow, grinding kind that was hard to name precisely because no single piece of it was large enough to hold up on its own. A schedule change that moved Tara to the most difficult rooms without explanation. A note left in her locker, handwritten and unsigned, saying her work on the 3rd floor had been noted as below standard, with no official follow-up or formal record attached. A break cut by 15 minutes because Patricia needed a floor finished before a committee visit, not asked, just announced. Once, in the break room with 2 other staff members present, Patricia had looked at Tara's lunch container and said, in front of everyone, that the break room was for professional use and personal items should be kept tidy. Tara had said nothing. She had picked up her container and moved to the end of the table and eaten her lunch looking out the window. She had not cried. She had not fought back. She had noted it. She added it to the list she kept in her head, not because she planned to use it immediately, but because she was a careful person and careful people kept track. The staff who witnessed these moments mostly looked away. The ones Tara was closest to were Patrice Ward, a registered nurse who fell outside Patricia's direct authority, and a floor technician named Leo Briggs who had worked at the hospital for 15 years and had mastered the art of being simultaneously present and invisible whenever Patricia entered a room. Patrice was the kind of friend who brought Tara coffee without being asked and asked real questions and listened to the actual answers. She had been the first person outside the family to hold Chloe as a baby, on the day Tara had brought her in to show the ward staff who had cared for Chloe those first difficult nights. Patrice had held her with steady hands and said, "This baby has good energy. She's going to run this town one day." She had said variations of this about Chloe ever since. It was Patrice who first said out loud what Tara had been thinking for months. "She does not think you belong here," Patrice had said quietly, over coffee in the small staff room off the pediatric wing. "Not because of your work. Your work is better than most of what she has on her floor. She does not like what you represent." Tara had thought about that for several days. She was not certain of exactly what Patrice meant, but she understood the shape of it. The sense that Patricia looked at her and saw something she had decided to push down before it settled too comfortably. Tara had not filed a complaint, partly because she had learned that complaints in environments like this tended to make things worse before they made them better. Partly because she did not yet have enough documented evidence to make a formal case that would hold. Partly because every hour of energy she gave to Patricia was an hour taken from Chloe, from Gloria, from simply existing without the weight of it pressing down. So she carried it, the way she carried most things, quietly, efficiently, without making it someone else's problem. At home, she was a different version of herself. Not a performed version, just a lighter one. She laughed more easily. She sat on the floor with Chloe and drew badly on purpose, so Chloe could correct her with the authority of a child who took drawing seriously. She cooked Sunday meals with Gloria, the two of them moving around the small kitchen with the ease of people who had shared a space for a long time. One evening in late January, Chloe looked up from her drawing at the kitchen table while Tara was washing dishes and said, completely without preamble, "Mama, I am glad you found me." Tara turned off the faucet. She turned around and looked at her daughter, sitting in the kitchen light in her green pajamas with a blue crayon in her hand. "I am glad too," Tara said. She dried her hands and sat down beside Chloe and looked at what she was drawing. It was their apartment building. She could tell from the shape and the two windows at the top. Inside one window was a small figure. Inside the other was a slightly larger one. "That one is me," Chloe said, pointing to the small figure. "That one is you." She picked up a red crayon and drew a third figure in the doorway. "That is Grandma Gloria," she said. "She is coming home." Tara looked at the drawing and felt something warm and specific move through her chest. She put her arm around Chloe and said, "She is always coming home." Chloe nodded, satisfied, and kept drawing. Tara did not know that night that everything in their quiet life was about to change. She did not know that across the city, a man in a navy blue suit was sitting in his office looking at a photograph that was 5 years old, holding the particular kind of grief that refuses to accept what it has been told. She did not know his name. She would. The cold of February settled into Lakeview like it intended to stay. Gloria had been moving slower for about 3 months. Tara had seen it in the small things first. The way Gloria held the kitchen counter when she stood up from her chair, the way she took the stairs one at a time instead of two, the way she had started sitting down to fold laundry. Gloria had a way of making these adjustments quietly, as if by not naming them, she could keep them from becoming something serious. Tara named them. She made the appointment for Gloria herself, calling from the hospital break room on a Tuesday when her shift ended early. She sat beside Gloria in the waiting room of Dr. Adiz Nwosu's office and held her mother's hand while they waited, the way their roles had gently begun to swap over the years. Dr. Nwosu had a directness that Tara appreciated. You always knew where you stood with her. Where they stood, as it turned out, was not where Tara had hoped. Dr. Nwosu explained it clearly. Gloria's kidneys had been declining for years, quietly, the way these things often did. They had reached the point where the decline could no longer be managed with medication alone. She needed to begin treatment. Given the stage and rate of progression, that meant dialysis to start and a consultation with a nephrologist about longer-term options. Tara asked every question she needed to ask. The schedule, what it involved for Gloria physically. She asked carefully about the cost. Dr. Nwosu was honest. Without insurance that covered the full scope, the cost of regular dialysis plus specialist consultations plus the required medications would be substantial. Gloria had basic coverage through a state senior assistance program, but there were limits. The gaps were real. Tara thanked her and helped Gloria put her coat back on. They walked to the parking lot and got into the blue sedan Tara had bought 2 years earlier when the bus route changed. She turned on the heat. Gloria did up her seatbelt. Neither of them spoke. Then Gloria said, "I have been saving a little." Tara said, "Mama." Gloria said, "Not a lot, but something." Tara said, "It is all right. We will figure it out." She drove home and did the math in her head the entire way. The next morning, before her shift started, she went to Patricia Holt's office. She knocked. Patricia looked up from her desk with a mild disapproval she kept ready for all occasions. Tara explained the situation without over-explaining. Her mother was ill. The treatment costs were beyond her current earnings. She was asking for additional shifts, overtime, or any supplemental duties that would allow her to earn more. She said she was prepared to work early mornings, evenings, weekends, any gap in the schedule that needed filling. Patricia listened. She was quiet for most of it. When Tara finished, Patricia looked down at the paper on her desk and made a small, deliberate adjustment with her pen, a gesture designed to look like she was too occupied with important work to give Tara her full attention. She said, "I have to work with the roster I have. I cannot create shifts that are not in the budget." She said it the way a person says something they rehearsed. Tara asked if there was any department with need of additional cleaning support, any way to get her name on an overtime list. Patricia said, "I will note your interest." She went back to her paper. Tara thanked her and left. She walked to the supply closet at the end of the corridor, where she started her shift, and stood with her hand on the door for a moment before she went in. She breathed in, breathed out, put on her gloves, filled her cart, and went to work. She did every room on her floor that morning with the focused precision of someone who needed the physical motion of work to keep her thoughts organized. She was not angry exactly. She was something that sat just below anger and was more tiring. She was the feeling of running hard at a wall that moved just far enough each time to make you think you might get through. At lunch, she sat with Patrice in the side room. She said she would note your interest. Patrice repeated after Tara gave her the summary. Yes. Patrice turned her coffee cup around in her hands. She gave overtime to 3 people on your floor in the last 2 months. One of them told me. Tara said nothing. Document everything, Patrice said quietly. Dates, times, what was said. Word for word. Your personal notebook, not your work phone. Tara nodded. She had already been doing exactly that for a year. That evening, after picking up Chloe and making dinner, and listening to Chloe describe every single thing that had happened at school, which was considerable because Chloe treated every school day as an event of significant importance, Tara put her daughter to bed and helped Gloria with her evening medication and sat at the kitchen table with her notebook. She wrote down the date, the time, what she had asked for, and what Patricia had said. Word for word, as close as she could recall it. Then she sat with the notebook closed in front of her and thought about numbers, about what dialysis costs and what her salary covered, and what the gap between those two things looked like in real terms. She did not let herself cry at the table. She waited until she was in the bathroom with the tap running and the door shut, and then she let herself have 2 minutes of it, the sharp, wordless kind that is not exactly sadness, but the weight of a problem with no clear path out. Then she washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror. She went back to the kitchen and opened her laptop and started looking at options. She was still at the table when Chloe came out at nearly midnight because she had woken from a dream and wanted water. Tara got up and got the water and carried Chloe back to bed and sat with her until she fell asleep again, a small warm weight against Tara's arm. She did not go back to the laptop. She sat in the dark beside her daughter and thought about how she was going to fix this. She did not know yet that the answer was already moving toward them, that it was going to walk through the front door of Lakeview General the next morning in a navy blue suit, carrying a 5-year-old grief he had learned to carry very quietly. She did not know his name yet. She would. He did, in fact, own the place. Cole Medical Group had acquired Lakeview General Hospital 7 years earlier as part of a broader expansion of its regional healthcare network. Nathan Cole had been CEO for 4 of those years, stepping into the role from his father when the elder Cole retired. He was 36, had the kind of steady, focused manner that made rooms of more experienced people take him seriously without him having to ask, and had a habit of doing things himself that he could have delegated if he was not also a person who believed you only actually knew a place by being in it. He came to Lakeview General twice a year for full board reviews. He could have sent Felix for both. He often did for the smaller quarterly check-ins. But twice a year, he came himself, walked the floors himself, and asked the questions that were not in the prepared report packets. He arrived at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning in February, when the hospital corridors were at full morning pace. He wore a navy blue suit and carried a leather portfolio and had his phone in his left hand, which he put away when Harold Jennings, the hospital director, came to meet him in the lobby with a handshake that tried slightly too hard. The board review was in the 4th floor conference suite. It went as these reviews usually did. Harold presented numbers. Department heads spoke to their sections. Nathan asked specific questions, not always the ones people had prepared for, which was usually how you found out where the real issues were. By 11:30, they had broken for coffee. Nathan had a list of follow-up items in his portfolio and a clear picture of 2 departments that needed attention. He stepped into the corridor while the department heads reassembled their materials and found a quiet corner to stand in and think through the morning. The hospital's 4th floor was administrative on one end and clinical on the other. The corridor between them was lit with clean, white overhead lights. The walls were pale blue-gray, meant to feel calm. It mostly did. He heard the cart before he saw it. It came around the corner with a small rolling sound that hospital cleaning carts made, a soft, regular motion he had heard hundreds of times in hundreds of facilities and never particularly registered. He stepped slightly to the side to give it room. The woman pushing it was in her hospital blue uniform. She had natural hair pinned back and moved with the efficiency of someone who had a system for her work and stayed inside it, guiding the cart with one hand and adjusting a cloth with the other. She had the kind of focus on her face that belongs to people who take ordinary work seriously. She had not seen him because she was looking at the section of corridor ahead of her. He stepped further to the right. And then he saw the child. The girl was sitting on a folded blanket against the wall, beside a small alcove with a visitor bench. She was perhaps 5 years old, with a set of small colored pencils and a drawing pad in her lap, working with the total concentration of someone whose work matters to her. Her hair was in 2 puffs on either side of her head, and she wore a blue dress with white buttons. She looked up when Nathan stopped. She looked at him with the direct, unimpressed gaze of a young child who had not yet learned to perform interest she did not feel. "Hello," Nathan said. "Hello," the child said. She looked back at her drawing. The woman with the cart had heard the exchange and looked over. She saw Nathan. A brief shift went through her expression, the specific kind of shift that belongs to a hospital worker who has just noticed a man in a very expensive suit standing near her station and is quickly deciding whether this is a problem. "I am sorry," she said. "She is not in anyone's way. I checked the space before I set up." "She is not in anyone's way," Nathan said. The woman looked at him for a moment. She had very direct, dark eyes.
"She is yours," he said.
"She is my daughter," the woman said. She said it the way people say things that are simply true and do not require elaboration.
"She is a good artist," he said.
He had glanced at the pad. The drawing was of a building with notable structural detail for a 5-year-old. The child held the pad up briefly, without looking away from her work. "I am drawing the hospital," she said. "It has a lot of floors." "It does," Nathan said. He should have moved on. He had 4 minutes before the meeting resumed. He knew this. He looked at the child. At the way she held her pencil, not in the fist grip of young children but with 2 fingers, the way someone holds a pen when they have been drawing for a long time. He looked at her face. The shape of it. Her brow when she concentrated. He looked at the back of her left ear. He could not see it from where he stood. She was turned slightly away. But something made him look for it, something he could not name precisely, a pull from a memory he had been carrying for 5 years like a weight he had stopped noticing because it was always there. He looked away. "I apologize for interrupting your work," he said to the woman. "It is fine," she said. She was watching him carefully in the way of a person who has learned to read rooms. He walked back toward the conference suite. He sat down, listened, took notes, asked 2 more questions, and did all of it properly. But he could not stop seeing the child's face. After the meeting, he stopped Harold Jennings in the corridor and asked a question that made the director blink. He asked about the woman he had seen on the 4th floor, the one with the cleaning cart and the small child. He said he was not making a complaint. He simply wanted to know who she was. Harold said he would find out. Nathan went back to the car with Felix, who had been in the meeting and who now watched his brother with the particular expression of someone who has noticed something happening and is waiting to be told what it is. Nathan said, "There was a child in the corridor." Felix said, "I saw her. Good drawing." Nathan said, "She had a birthmark behind her ear." Felix was quiet. Then he turned to look at Nathan fully. "You saw it. I was not close enough. But I looked for it." The car was quiet. Then Felix said, "Nathan." Nathan said, "I know. It has been 5 years. I know that." They drove in silence. The city passed the windows. Felix said, "What do you need?" Nathan said, "I need to know who she is. The child and the woman with her." Quietly. "No pressure on anyone." Felix said, "I will make some calls." Nathan told himself he was probably wrong. He had seen things that reminded him of his daughter before. At a supermarket once. At an airport. Each time the feeling had surged and then subsided into that familiar, low ache. He was probably wrong again. But he was not going to let this one go without being certain. Felix was efficient when he needed to be. He had made 2 phone calls by the time Nathan reached home that evening. The first went to the hospital's HR department, which fell within the Cole Medical Group structure and was therefore not a difficult reach. The second went to Gerald Park, who had been Nathan's attorney for 8 years and who had become, over time, the person Nathan trusted most with things that were too important to handle carelessly. By the following morning, Felix had a name. He came to Nathan's home office, a well-lit room with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city, and sat across the wide desk and said, "The woman is Tara Lewis. She has been with Lakeview General for 7 years. Her personnel record is clean. No formal complaints, good reviews from before her current supervisor. The child's name is Chloe Lewis. She was adopted by Tara 5 years ago. She was found as a newborn, placed in foster care, and Tara applied for the placement and later adopted her formally. The adoption was finalized just over 3 years ago. Nathan sat very still.
Found, he said.
Where? Felix looked at the paper in his hand. The social services intake from 5 years back has the location details. Gerald is pulling the public record of the original intake. Can he get it? He is getting it. Today or tomorrow. Nathan stood and walked to the window. The February city spread out below, bright and cold, the kind of clear light that had no warmth in it but showed everything very sharply. He stood with his hands in his pockets. 5 years ago, his daughter was born 3 weeks early at Lakeview General. He had been there. He had seen her. He had held her for 11 minutes in a room lit with clean white overhead lights. Sandra had asked him to step out while the nurses ran final checks. He had gone to the hallway and stood there holding a feeling he had no comparison for, the sensation of having just met a person who had always existed somewhere inside him. When he was allowed back in, Sandra was pale and still. The doctor came and said the words carefully in the way doctors did when the words were the worst kind. The baby had passed. A complication. It happened sometimes with early deliveries. He was very sorry. Nathan had not believed it. Not in the first hour. Not in the first weeks. There was no death certificate that felt real. There was no explanation that fit the shape of what he knew, which was not grief but something more like refusal. He had held his daughter. She had opened her eyes for 2 seconds and looked at the ceiling and then at his face. She had been alive in every possible meaning of the word. He had launched an investigation. Gerald had helped. They had questioned staff, reviewed records, filed every inquiry they could legally make. Nothing conclusive came back. Sandra had appeared devastated. Nathan had been in a state of controlled grief, so consuming that it had taken him a long time to start looking at Sandra as someone who might not have been telling the truth. By the time he did, the trail was cold. Sandra had left him. The divorce was finalized. She had moved east. Gerald's inquiries had gone quiet without resolution. But Nathan had never stopped believing his daughter was alive. He had never been able to make himself accept otherwise. The search had gone quiet, but it had never ended. It had become the permanent, low hum of something he carried everywhere, without speaking of it. He turned from the window. Gerald needs the specific location where the baby was found, he said. Not the general record. The exact location.
He will find it, Felix said.
And I need to see the birthmark. Felix nodded. He knew what that meant. He had been there on the day of the birth, outside in the corridor, when Nathan had come out to tell him about his daughter. Nathan had said, "She has the most remarkable little birthmark behind her left ear. A curve, like a crescent moon." He had said it with the specific, careful delight of a new father cataloging every detail of his child. Felix had written it in his phone not for any reason, just because it seemed like something that should exist somewhere. He still had that note. "What do we do about Tara Lewis?" Felix said. Nathan sat back down. He thought for a moment. Nothing yet. No approach. No contact. I do not want her pressured or alarmed. If the location checks out, and Gerald can get what we need to proceed properly, we go through proper channels. We do not go around them. And if the birthmark does not match, Nathan said, then I am wrong and I leave them alone. He said it steadily. Felix knew his brother. He knew the thing that had lived in Nathan's chest for 5 years was not capable of sitting still about this for very long. Meanwhile, 2 miles away, Tara was starting her morning shift. She had no idea 2 conversations had been held about her the previous evening. She had no idea that a name and a file and a set of inquiries now existed with her daughter's name in them. She knew only that it was Wednesday, her floor needed cleaning, and Chloe had mentioned at breakfast that she wanted to draw a picture of the man in the nice suit from the corridor because she had not had time to draw him while she was there. Tara had asked, "What man?" Chloe said, "The man who said I was a good artist. He was tall."
Tara had thought about it.
There had been a man. She had noticed him because he stopped and spoke to Chloe in a way that was genuine rather than performing the standard adult warmth people directed at children they were not interested in. His suit was not the kind hospital administrators wore. It was the kind that belonged to someone who made decisions in rooms she was not in. She had filed him under. Not a problem, and moved on. She was filing him that way again as she pushed her cart toward the East Wing when Patricia Holt stepped out of the supply room and blocked her path. Patricia had her arms in their standard crossed position. Without preamble, she said she had received feedback from administrative staff about a child being present in fourth-floor corridors during working hours. She said the hospital had policies. She said she expected Tara to make other childcare arrangements on days when they were needed during work hours. Tara said, carefully, that Chloe sat in a designated visitor area and had never been in any clinical space. She said she had done this for 3 years without incident. Patricia said she was not interested in the history of the arrangement. She was interested in the policy going forward. Tara said, with respect, the policy as written does not prohibit children from visitor or common areas. I reviewed it. A brief silence. Patricia said, I will be monitoring the 4th floor going forward.
She walked away.
Tara stood in the corridor for a moment. Then she took out her notebook and wrote down the date, the time, and what Patricia had said, word for word. Then she put the notebook away and pushed her cart to the East Wing and started her floor. The call from Dr. Nwosu came on a Thursday afternoon in the 3rd week of February. Gloria had been for her first nephrology consultation that morning with Dr. Amara Okonkwo at Lakeview General's outpatient clinic. The specialist had run a full blood panel as part of the assessment. The results confirmed what Dr. Nwosu had already suspected about the stage of the disease. More than that, Dr. Okonkwo had flagged something specific that affected the treatment pathway. Gloria's blood type was AB negative. For the specific early intervention procedure Dr. Okonkwo was recommending, a filtration treatment that would slow the rate of kidney decline significantly if started now. The protocol required access to a matched blood supply in case of reaction. AB negative was among the rarest types. The hospital's general blood bank did not have it in sufficient supply for the full protocol. Dr. Nwosu was calling to say they were looking at options. There was a path forward, but it required a source. Tara sat in the hospital parking lot after her shift, phone pressed to her ear, and listened carefully to every word. She asked the right questions. She thanked Dr. Nwosu and hung up. She called Patrice. Patrice answered immediately, as she usually did for Tara. Tara explained the situation in brief, factual terms. She said she was not falling apart. She just needed to know if Patrice had any clinical knowledge about the blood supply situation. Patrice said, AB negative. All right, let me think. I will make some calls. Tara said, I can cover whatever costs they need, whatever I have to do. Patrice said, you focus on your mama. Let me look into this. What Patrice found, through a conversation with a colleague in the hospital's blood services department, surprised them both. Cole Medical Group maintained a private supply agreement with a specialized blood bank in the state. The arrangement had been set up originally by Raymond Cole, Nathan's late father, who had been AB negative himself, and who had built the supply relationship partly out of personal interest in ensuring the type was reliably available within the group's facilities. It was an unusual arrangement, not widely known within the hospital system, but it was real, documented, and active. The supply was there. The question was authorization. Patrice brought this to Tara the following morning, finding her on the 3rd floor during the mid-morning quiet. Tara listened. She asked about the process for accessing the supply. Patrice said it went through administrative channels at the group level. It was Gerald Park who brought the situation to Nathan's attention. Gerald had been reviewing hospital records as part of his broader inquiry, and Patrice's access request had crossed an administrative desk that flagged to his office during a routine review. He called Nathan and mentioned it. He said it was not directly connected to the inquiry, but that Nathan might want to know. Nathan said, Is it the same woman? Gerald said, It is Tara Lewis's mother, Gloria Lewis. The blood supply she needs is within the group's private arrangement. Nathan was quiet. Then he said, Authorize it. Full access. All costs covered through the group's medical support fund. Do this today, Gerald. Gerald said, You should know this may create a connection that affects the other situation. Nathan said, I know that. Authorize it. Gerald made the calls. By the next morning, Dr. Okonkwo's office had received confirmation that the blood supply was secured and all associated costs had been covered under a Cole Medical Group medical support authorization. The message from the group's office said simply that this was a standard application of the group's community care fund, available to staff and their immediate families. Tara received a call from Dr. Okonkwo's office. She was in the supply closet when her phone rang and she answered it and heard the nurse say that the blood supply had been confirmed and the procedure could be scheduled. Tara said, I am sorry. Could you say that again? The nurse said it again. Tara said, the cost? The nurse said, covered in full under a Cole Medical Group authorization. The fund covers staff and their immediate family. You are listed as eligible. Tara stood in the supply closet for a moment. The shelves of cleaning materials surrounded her in their neat rows. The fluorescent light above hummed faintly. She said, please tell me who to thank. I want to do this properly. The nurse said the authorization had come from the group's administrative office, and she did not have a specific contact name. Tara said thank you and hung up. She called Patrice immediately. Patrice made a sound that was not quite a word but carried relief and something close to victory in equal measure. She said, someone with a conscience made a call. Take it, Tara. Take it and let your mama get better. Tara said, I intend to. I just want to know who to thank. She would find out.
But not that day.
That day she called Gloria and told her that the procedure was going to happen. That everything had been arranged. Gloria was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then she said, you did that. Tara said, someone helped. Gloria said, you let them help. That matters too. Tara leaned against the supply closet door and let herself feel relieved for a full 60 seconds. She counted them. Then she stood up straight, put her phone in her pocket, and went back to her floor. She did not know yet that the person who had made the authorization call was the same man her daughter had described drawing in the corridor 2 weeks earlier. The man in the nice suit. The tall one. She would know soon. The request came through Gerald Park. He called Tara's mobile on a Wednesday morning, 2 weeks after the blood supply authorization had gone through. He introduced himself carefully, the legal representative of Cole Medical Group. He said there was a matter he wanted to discuss with her in person. He said it was not connected to her employment, and she was not in any trouble. He said it was sensitive and easier to explain face to face. Tara had learned over the years that very few calls that started that way were actually fine. But she was a person who preferred knowing things to not knowing them, even when what she learned was hard. She asked what day and what time, and she arranged it. She met Gerald in a small conference room at the hospital's administrative wing. He was a man in his late 40s with precise movements and an organized manner even when the desk he was using was borrowed. He had a folder and a laptop. He explained who he was. He explained that Nathan Cole, the CEO of Cole Medical Group, had asked him to handle this conversation. Tara said, "This is about Chloe." Gerald paused. "There is reason to believe it may be." He explained the situation as clearly as he could. Nathan Cole had lost a daughter 5 years ago. The circumstances of that loss had never fully added up. It had been a matter of private inquiry for years without resolution. Nathan had seen Chloe in the hospital corridor and had noticed something that warranted further inquiry. Tara sat very still. "He wants a DNA test," she said. "He is requesting one. With your full consent. There is no legal obligation. You can decline." Tara looked at the table for a moment. She thought about Chloe's face. The birthmark behind her left ear that the pediatric nurse had noted on the original intake form, a distinguishing mark. Tara had read it at the time and filed it as one of the many small details that made Chloe herself. She thought about the service entrance, the thin cloth, the February cold. She thought about a newborn left in an alcove, alone, and about a man who had been searching for 5 years for a daughter he believed was alive. These two things were forming a shape in her mind that she did not want to look at directly yet. She said, "If I say yes to the test, what happens?" Gerald said, "The results are reviewed. Whatever they say, Nathan Cole wants to meet with you personally before anything else moves forward. He wants to explain everything himself. She said, he covered my mother's treatment costs. Gerald said, yes. She said, before the test was agreed to. Gerald said, yes. Tara looked at him carefully. Why? Gerald said, because it was the right thing to do. The results did not change that. She sat with that for a moment. Then she said, I will do the test. The test was arranged discreetly, handled through the hospital's own lab, with a specialist overseeing the process. It required a simple cheek swab from Chloe, which Tara explained to her daughter as a medical check. Chloe submitted to it with the mild patience of a child who found medical procedures uninteresting. The results took 6 days. On the morning the results came in, Tara was called to the 4th floor conference room. She had dropped Chloe at school and come straight in. She had not been able to eat breakfast. The room had wide windows and cool white light and pale blue chairs. Gerald was already there. Nathan Cole came in 2 minutes after Tara. He was wearing a dark green suit. He sat at the far end of the table and looked at her with an expression she could not fully read, but she recognized that it was not cold. Gerald opened the folder. He read the relevant section of the report in a steady voice. The probability figure. What it meant. The conclusion the analysis had reached. The room went quiet. Gerald slid the paper across the table. Tara looked at the numbers. She read them twice. They said the same thing both times. Chloe was Nathan Cole's biological daughter. Tara set the paper down. She folded her hands over it. The light through the windows was very bright and very clean, and she looked at it for a moment rather than at either of the men in the room. She thought about the night in the service entrance. The thin cloth. The sound so faint she almost missed it. Picking up the baby and carrying her through the interior doors. 5 years of library books and sock seams and Sunday meals and crayon drawings, and a small girl who drew their apartment building from memory and placed all 3 of them inside it. She thought about the feeling in her chest on the day the adoption was finalized. She put her hands flat on the table. Tell me, she said. Her voice was steady. She was glad of that. Tell me everything. Nathan leaned forward. He looked at her directly. I am going to, he said. He started 5 years ago. He told her about the birth. About the 11 minutes. About the doctor who had come in and said the words. He told her about the investigation he had launched and how it had gone quiet, without resolution. He told her about the feeling he had never been able to name, the one that refused to accept what he had been told. He told her about the day in the corridor, what he had noticed and why it mattered. He told her about Sandra. He said he did not yet have proof of exactly what Sandra had arranged, but he had a strong and specific suspicion, and Gerald was building the case. Tara listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she said, Why did you cover my mother's costs before you had the results? Nathan said, Because it was the right thing to do. Tara looked at him for a long moment. What do you want? She said. Nathan said, I want my daughter to know who her father is. I want her to be safe and loved and to have everything she deserves. He paused. I also want you to know that I do not see this as a situation where you lose something. You raised her. That is real. Nothing in a DNA result changes what you are to her. Tara looked at the paper. She said, What happens next? Nathan said, We find out the truth about how she ended up where you found her. We deal with that through proper channels. And then we figure out how to move forward in a way that is right for Chloe. Together. The words settled in the room. Tara said, I need time to think. Nathan said, Take whatever time you need. There is no pressure. I am not going anywhere. She nodded. She stood and took the report with her because it was hers and she needed to hold it rather than leave it in a folder in a room she was walking out of. She walked out of the conference room, through the corridor into the elevator. She pressed the lobby button and stood in the moving elevator and let herself feel, for those 20 seconds of descent, everything she had held back at the table. When the doors opened, she walked. If this story is reaching you, if you are feeling everything Tara is carrying right now, do not leave this page without subscribing, because what happens next is the part nobody saw coming. Comment below. Should Tara trust Nathan? Does she even have a choice? Subscribe and come back for the next chapter because everything is about to shift. Gerald Park had been a lawyer for 22 years and had learned early that people who built large lies rarely built them alone. Large lies needed architecture. They needed help. And help, over time, tended to get tired of what it had been asked to hold up. The hospital orderly who had been involved in Sandra's plan was a man named Dennis Farrow. He was 52 now and had left Lakeview General 4 years ago. He worked at a pharmacy distribution warehouse 40 minutes outside the city. Gerald had found him through a combination of old HR records, a name appearing in a peripheral note in an incident log, and a conversation with a former colleague who remembered that Farrow had left the hospital suddenly and had not been his usual self for months before that. Gerald drove to the warehouse himself. He sat in his car in the parking lot and reviewed his notes before he went in. He went inside with a business card and one specific question. Dennis Farrow had looked at the card and then at Gerald and had said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "I have been waiting for someone to come." The account he gave, over 2 conversations, and then a formal recorded statement on the 3rd visit, put the full structure of Sandra's deception into a shape that could be handled legally. Sandra Voss had contacted Farrow 3 weeks before the birth. She had found him through a mutual contact from a hospital administrative event, a conversation that had moved quickly from social to transactional. She had been specific about what she needed. She had paid him through 3 separate transfers to a personal account, the kind that left records if someone knew to look. What she had instructed him to do was to remove the baby from the nursery wing after the birth and leave her somewhere she could be found safely but not traced back to the hospital directly. She had arranged, through a separate contact whose name Farrow did not know, to have the death documentation processed internally. She had managed the clinical deception with the assistance of a doctor who had since moved to another country, whose name Gerald was still tracking. Farrow had taken the baby on the night of February 4th. He had wrapped her in a clean cloth from the hospital linen supply. He had walked to the service entrance because that was where Sandra had told him to go, near enough to the hospital that the baby would be found, far enough from the main entrances that the security cameras would not capture the handoff clearly. He had stood at the service entrance for 6 minutes. He had looked at the baby. He had tried to walk away twice. On the 3rd attempt, he could not do it. He had carried her into the alcove instead, tucked between the cardboard boxes and the wall, out of the direct wind. He had placed her where someone coming in from the service doors would find her quickly. Then he had gone home and been sick, and had not slept properly for 2 years. He had never reported it because he was afraid. He had told himself the baby was found and was fine, which he had later confirmed by checking birth records he had no right to access. He had told himself it was over. He had lived with that decision every single day since. He told Gerald all of this with the particular exhaustion of a person who has been carrying something very heavy for a long time and has finally set it down. He said he would sign whatever needed to be signed. He said he would appear wherever he was required. He said he was sorry multiple times and in different ways, and the last time he said it, he meant it specifically for the child. Gerald brought the full account to Nathan the following morning. Nathan sat with it for a while. Then, he called his attorney to begin the criminal referral process and called Felix to tell him what they had. Felix, who had been quietly furious about Sandra for years in the specific way of someone who had watched his brother suffer without being able to do anything about it, said 2 words that Gerald pretended not to hear. Sandra Voss was in Connecticut when the legal papers reached her. She had a comfortable life there, a social circle that knew nothing about what she had arranged 5 years ago, an apartment that reflected a woman who had moved completely past everything she had left behind. The papers arrived on a Tuesday. Her attorney called Nathan's attorney and attempted to negotiate. That conversation lasted 1 phone call and ended without progress. Sandra then tried to contact Nathan directly. He did not take the call. He had Gerald respond in writing, formally and briefly. The criminal referral was filed with the Lakeview County District Attorney's Office on a Thursday. It was accompanied by Farrow's signed statement, the financial transfer records Gerald's firm had recovered, the falsified hospital documentation, and a complete timeline filing from Gerald's office that laid out every step in verifiable sequence. The DA's office began its review. Judge Margaret Osei, who presided over the family court division and who had a reputation for thorough patience and complete resistance to anything that was not evidence, was assigned to the civil custody portion of the matter. Gerald called Tara and walked her through every piece of it. He answered all her questions, without hedging. He told her she had full legal standing as Chloe's adoptive mother and that nothing in the criminal proceedings changed that standing. He said Nathan had already instructed his legal team to support her position at every stage. Tara said, "He is supporting my position?" Gerald said, "He wants Chloe to have both of you. He made that very clear to me." Tara was quiet for a moment. She thought about a newborn in an alcove in February. The thin cloth. 6 minutes, which was how long Pharaoh had stood there before he could not walk away. She was glad she had not known his name for a long time. She was not sure what she would have done with it if she had. She said, "What happens now?" Gerald said, "Nathan would like to meet with you. He has something he wants to ask you." Nathan's office on the 32nd floor of the Cole Medical Building had a view that Tara looked at for a moment when she came in, before she sat down.
It was a clear day.
One of those early March days that is still cold but has something different in the light, a brightness that belongs to a season trying to arrive. The city spread out in all directions below the window, ordinary and enormous, doing what cities do in the morning. Nathan stood when she came in. He was in a navy blue suit. He gestured toward the sitting area rather than the desk, 2 chairs, and a small table. He had coffee and water. He asked which she preferred and poured it when she said coffee without comment. They sat. He said, "How is Chloe?" Tara said, "She drew a picture of a lion yesterday. For no particular reason. She is fine." He said, "And your mother?" The procedure went well. She starts the regular sessions next week. The specialist says if she responds well over the next 2 months, the outlook is significantly better than it was in February. He said, "I am glad." A brief quiet settled over the room. Tara said, "I know you have something you want to say. You can say it." Nathan leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees and looked at her in the way she had come to recognize as his genuine mode, distinct from the CEO manner he wore in full rooms. He said, "I want to talk about what comes next. For Chloe. And for all of us." He said the legal situation was moving forward. He said Sandra's case was in the DA's hands and the custody matter was before Judge Osei, and that his legal team was handling both with full resources, and that Tara was represented at every stage. He said none of that was what he actually wanted to say. He said, "Chloe has 2 parents. You and me. One of us gave her the first 11 minutes of her life before she was taken away. The other one gave her 5 years of everything. I know which of those things is more." He paused. He looked at his hands and then back at her. He said, "I do not want to be someone who shows up and takes something apart. That is not what I am here for. I want to be someone who adds to what she already has." Tara said, "What are you asking?" Nathan said, "I am asking you to let me be in her life properly, as her father, and I am asking you to let that happen inside a life we build together. Not separately, not with lawyers managing visitation, but together." Tara looked at him. He said, "I am asking you to marry me." The room was very quiet. She could hear the city outside the window at its ordinary volume. She thought about the first time she had seen him in the corridor, the man who had stopped and said something genuine about Chloe's drawing. She thought about the blood supply authorization that had arrived before she even knew his name. She thought about the conference room and the DNA report and the way he had said, "I am not here to take her from you." She thought about Chloe's drawing of their apartment building, 3 figures inside it. She thought about her mother's voice on the phone saying, "You let them help. That matters too." She said, "I do not know you very well yet." He said, "I know that." She said, "Chloe would need to be told. Properly.
Carefully.
On a timeline that is right for her." He said, "Completely agreed. We do this at her pace. Not mine." She said, "And you understand that I am her mother. Not in a legal arrangement. Not in a document. Her mother." He said, "There is nothing in this world I understand more clearly." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, Yes. Nathan Cole sat very still for a moment, like a man who has been waiting for something for so long that when it arrives, he is not certain he is hearing it correctly. Then he said, quietly, "Thank you." Tara said, "Don't thank me yet. We have a 5-year-old who has opinions about nearly everything and will expect to be consulted on all of it." Something shifted in Nathan's expression. He almost smiled, the full version of it, and she saw what it looked like. "Then we consult her," he said. "We do," Tara said. She looked out at the city. The light was very clear and bright, the kind of early March morning that did not ask anything of you, just showed you the world as it was. She had not expected any of this. Not the DNA test, not the truth about where Chloe had come from, not the man who had spent 5 years not giving up, not the question he had asked in a quiet room on a high floor on a bright morning. She had not expected it. But she had said yes and she meant it, and that was what mattered. 2 days after that meeting, Nathan placed a call to Harold Jennings, the hospital director. He did not make demands. He asked that a formal workplace conduct review be opened for the Environmental Services Department. He said he had reason to believe there were patterns of staff treatment that did not reflect the hospital's stated policies and needed to be addressed properly. Harold nodded carefully and said he would initiate the review immediately. The review team spent 4 days interviewing environmental services staff. They were thorough. They interviewed Leo Briggs, who had 15 years of very specific memory. They interviewed 2 other staff members who had witnessed incidents. They interviewed Tara, who opened her notebook and read from it, date by date, word by word, without drama. At the end of the review, the panel's findings went to HR. Patricia Holt was given the opportunity to respond. Her response did not address the specific documented incidents. It addressed, instead, general statements about her management philosophy. The panel found the specific incidents substantiated. Patricia Holt was dismissed from her position the following Thursday. She was escorted to collect her things and then escorted out of the building. The slightly crooked nameplate on her office door was removed by a maintenance worker who straightened it briefly before pulling it off. Tara heard from Patrice, who sent a single line. "She is gone." The nameplate came off crooked. "Seems about right." Tara read it in the parking lot after her shift. She thought about 3 years of notes in a small personal notebook, about the overtime that was denied, and the break that was cut, and the note in the locker, and every deliberate, grinding act of a person who believed she could make someone small. She did not celebrate. She sat with it for a moment, let the fact of it be real, and then put her phone away and drove home to make dinner. The court date was a Tuesday in April. Judge Margaret Osei presided in Family Courtroom 3, a room with good overhead lighting and no theater in it. Seats for the parties, a bench, a flag, and the focused attention of a judge who had seen many versions of this kind of story and who was interested in facts and not in anyone's performance of them. Gerald was at the table for Nathan and Tara. Sandra's attorney was across the room. Sandra had chosen not to appear, which her attorney had advised strongly against. Sandra had made many choices her attorneys had advised against. The criminal proceedings were in a separate division and would move on their own timeline. What Judge Osei was handling today was the civil custody question: who Chloe Lewis was legally and what the structure of her family looked like going forward. Judge Osei had reviewed the full file: the adoption records, the original foster placement documents, the DNA analysis, Dennis Farrow's statement, the falsified hospital documentation, Gerald's complete case file, and Tara's parenting record for 5 years, documented in the adoption file and the annual social services assessments. She spoke clearly and without excess. She confirmed Tara Lewis as Chloe's legal mother in full and without condition. She confirmed Nathan Cole as Chloe's biological father and granted him full parental status, noting that his conduct throughout the proceedings was consistent with parental commitment. She stripped Sandra Voss of all parental rights, citing the clear and documented evidence of her actions. She noted that the criminal proceedings would address the additional dimensions of Sandra's conduct in the appropriate division. She signed the order. The hearing lasted 22 minutes. Tara and Nathan walked out into the bright April morning. Felix was on the courthouse steps. Patrice had taken the morning off and was there. Gloria was seated on the bench near the entrance because the steps were a bit much for her still, wearing a blue coat and looking at Tara with an expression that said everything she did not need words for. Tara sat beside her mother and took her hand. Gloria said, "All right?" Tara said, "All right." Gloria patted her hand. They had told Chloe about Nathan 2 weeks earlier. It had been a Sunday, which was Chloe's favorite day because of the meals and the slowness of it. Tara had sat with Chloe in the living room after breakfast, and Nathan had been there, on the sofa, in a dark green sweater rather than a suit, which Tara had suggested because 5-year-olds did not require formality. They had told Chloe, in simple and accurate terms, that Nathan was her birth father. They had told her what that meant. They had told her that Tara was her mama and would always be her mama, and that Nathan being her father added something. It did not take anything away. Chloe had listened with the focused seriousness of a child who understood this was an important conversation and was giving it appropriate attention. She asked 3 questions. The first was whether Nathan liked drawing. Nathan said he was not good at it. Chloe said she could teach him. The second question was whether he was going to live in their house. Tara said they were still working out how everything would look, but that everyone would be together a lot. Chloe nodded as if this were a reasonable answer. The third question was whether Nathan had a car. Nathan said, "I do." Chloe said, "What color?" Nathan said, "Blue." Chloe said, "That is a good color." She had gone back to her drawing after that with the air of someone who has processed all the necessary information and is ready to continue. 2 weeks after the court date, Dr. Okonkwo confirmed that Gloria's response to the dialysis protocol had been better than projected. She was stable. The treatment plan was working. There was a path forward that was real and manageable, and it was no longer a question of what Tara could afford alone, because that was not what it was anymore. The wedding was in late May. Patrice had found and booked and decorated the venue, a garden space at a community event center, with the focused energy of someone who had been waiting to do something celebratory for a long time. The flowers were white and blue. The chairs were white. The light was the kind of late May afternoon light that is bright and clear and not trying to be anything other than what it is, which is good light for a good day. Tara wore a deep maroon dress with 3/4 sleeves and her natural hair out in a full, beautiful crown. Nathan wore a navy blue suit. He was waiting at the front of the garden when she came in, and he looked at her the way he looked at things he had learned to value, by almost losing them. Chloe wore a red dress with a wide sash and white shoes that she had picked herself from 3 options, immediately and without hesitation, because she was a child who knew her own mind. She had also brought her drawing pad. During the ceremony, which was short and said exactly what needed to be said, Chloe sat in the front row between Gloria and Patrice and drew in her pad quietly. When the official part was done and Tara and Nathan turned to face everyone, Chloe stood up, walked to the front, and held up her drawing. It was 3 figures holding hands. One small one in a red dress in the middle. One taller one in maroon on the left. One tall one in blue on the right. Below the figures, in the careful, large-letter handwriting of a child just beginning to control it, she had written, "Our family." The garden was quiet for a moment. Nathan crouched down and looked at the drawing properly. He said, "Can I have this one?" Chloe said, "I am going to frame it." He said, "We can do both." Chloe considered this seriously. She said, "Okay, but I frame it first." He said, "Deal." He looked up at Tara. She was looking at Chloe with the expression she got when something was so right that no other word existed for it. Gloria was in the front row, a blue handkerchief she had brought specifically for this purpose pressed to her eyes. Patrice sat beside her, doing the same while pretending she was not. Felix stood at the side of the garden with his hands in his pockets, and the look of a man who is very glad things turned out the way they did. In the kitchen of the event center, the catering team was setting up for the reception. Outside in the garden, the late May light moved across the grass in the way that good light does, steadily and without effort. Tara Lewis and Nathan Cole stood in the middle of all of it, with their daughter between them, in a garden full of the people who had helped them get here, and they were exactly where they were supposed to be. That was how it landed. Not with a single large moment that changed everything in an instant, but with a quiet arrival of things that had been moving toward each other for 5 years, finding their place, piece by piece, until the picture was complete. Chloe held up her drawing and looked at both of them. I am going to draw the party next, she said. Good idea, Tara said. Chloe sat back down, opened her pad,